Hey, welcome to Tell Us Something. Pat Williams is a Butte native. He taught for 30 years from elementary, junior high, high school, and university grad students. He's lived in Missoula for 19 years. He served on the Montana legislature in the 60s and represented Montana in the U.S. Congress for 9 terms. That is more consecutive terms than any other person in Montana's history. Also, I just learned that he's Evel Knievel's cousin. Please welcome Pat Williams.
How are you? All right. Drink up. Drink up. I'm from Butte. When a Butte guy drinks, everybody drinks. Drink up. Merry Christmas, by the way. It's nice to see you all here. They sure get good crowds for this storytelling, which I think both the storytelling and the really good crowds is really important. And I like to come because I get to see a lot of people I don't know, although I see some that I do know here as well. The subject is dreams. Probably the most remembered remarks about a dream were delivered in 1963 by Reverend Martin Luther King in his I Had a Dream. I had the good fortune about 25 years ago. I know for some of you that was a very long time ago, but for some of us it was not a very long time. I had the good fortune of having dinner with Coretta Scott King long after the Reverend's assassination, and we had a good visit. There were 8 of us, and I was lucky enough to sit next to her. I was still serving you in the United States Congress at that time, and I said to her about halfway through the meal, I could see she was very friendly and talkative, and although a very formal lady, I said, Mrs. King, if you know, what gave your husband the spirit, the lift, the ability to give that famous speech at the Lincoln Memorial? And she said, oh, yes. She said, that's a good story, and not many people ask me. She said it was August 27th, 1963, and the now famous Civil Rights March on Washington was that morning, the next morning, 28th. And she said, Martin and I were staying at the Washington Hotel, which is just off Pennsylvania Avenue, and you can kind of see the Lincoln Memorial from there. And she said, we stayed there and we had a small suite, a 2-room suite. And she said that night, Martin excused himself around 9 o'clock, and he and Ralph Abernathy and 2 or 3 other aides went into the off-bedroom area and were trying to pull his speech together. And she said Martin would always write his speeches at the last moment because he wanted to be able to catch the times exactly as they were happening. And so she said they were in there, and he came into the bedroom a few times and sat alone on the bed, and said around midnight or 1 o'clock it woke me up, and I said, how you doing? And he said, I can't get it right. She said, what's it about? Maybe I can help you. And he said, well, it's about how every American, according to the Constitution, every American is born with a set of promises, freedom of speech and so on. And so he said, I'm trying to refer to those as every American's trust fund, but that there are some Americans who, when they cash a check, meaning black Americans and Americans of color, he said, when we cash a check, it bounces. right? We have this fund set up at birth for us by the government, right, by the Constitution, but our checks bounce. He said, I think it's a little convoluted and a little too hard, a little too difficult, a little too cute, I think she said. But I'm too far into it now, we're going to go ahead with it. So she said they shut the door between the rooms, but I could hear them in there talking. And she said I fell asleep a couple of times, then I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning to hear the door shut out into the hallway from that second room. And she said he had said to them, she found out later, go ahead home, folks, I'll finish this, I'll be all right now, we're on a good start. And she said at 5:30, I woke up and Martin was still pacing back and forth and writing as he went. And then she said at 6:30 or 6:45, he finally came to bed. I said to him, did you get it? And he said, yeah, I didn't any good, but I got it. So she said the car was waiting for us out front to drive us, even though the Lincoln Memorial is just across the street. There were hundreds of thousands of people on the street, so they had a escort around and to the Lincoln Memorial. And she said Ralph Abernathy was in the front and Martin and I were in the back seat. And said Martin scribbling and taking stuff out and putting stuff in, writing it on the road. I mean, in the back of the car, right, going there. And said Ralph turned around and said, are you still making changes, Martin? And she said, Martin said, this speech just isn't any good, Ralph. Now, she said, prior to this, for about a year, Martin had been having a reoccurring dream. She said it came in different episodes and about different things, but it was basically the same dream about the rights of all Americans, in which, he was entirely encased in those days. And he had told his friends about this dream that wouldn't let him go, keeping him awake some nights. And so she said, as we're getting close to the Lincoln Memorial, he said, do either of you, talking to Ralph and her, do either of you know a synonym for such and such a word? And he asked him a couple of times. And finally she said, Ralph put his arm on the back of the seat and said, Martin, you don't like that speech. You never give speeches you don't like. Why don't you just tell them about your dream? She said, Martin laughed and said, oh, I haven't written a word of that. So he stands up, and if you have a chance, and you can Google it, it's easy to get. The whole speech lasts 15 minutes. 12 of those minutes are about the blank check thing. And he was right, it's terrible. It's a terrible speech. Ralph Abernathy had said to the wonderful singer, Mahalia Jackson, Mahalia, you're going to stand right behind him. If this isn't working, why don't you lean over to him and say, Reverend, tell him about your dream. So she does. Look it up on Google. You can see him put his speech aside, put an elbow on the podium and say, I have a dream. And then to begin to talk, as in my opinion, no other American has ever been able to talk about the basic rights of all citizens and how with simple goodwill toward men this Christmas season and all, we can get there. We can get there, he said, in the hills of New York. We can get there in the hills of Tennessee and Alabama and Mississippi. We can all get there. And you remember he said, and when we do, we'll be able to say, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. Merry Christmas.
Thank you again to all the storytellers, and thanks to you all for coming out to support them. Thanks to the Top Hat and the staff here who rocked it again. You guys are awesome. Please like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Thanks again to the bookstore at the University of Montana, Fact and Fiction Books, Rockin' Rudy's, Haley Faust, and Zoo City Apparel. Thanks again, everybody.